Alright, today we're talking about a Minuteman loadout, and you know what they say, there's no old fool like the old school, or there's no old school like an old fool. I don't know. We're going old school, men. Stand by for Retro Tactical. Cue the intro. Alright, so a Minuteman loadout. Before we do this, I gotta define some terms for you here. This is a Minuteman loadout. This isn't a shit hit the fan loadout. This isn't a survival loadout. This isn't a bug out. This is a Minuteman loadout. And for you to understand what I'm about to say, you have to remember the classical definition of a Minuteman. A Minuteman was a very real unit in a larger militia. In the old days, all men between the ages of 20 and 60 served in a militia, and if there was an emergency of any kind, the militia would get called out. That'd be all those men in that age range. There was usually a smaller corps, cadre, whatever you want to say, contingent inside the larger militia that would respond first. They would all respond at the same time, but these guys would get there quick. They were usually younger guys. They'd grab their gear and they'd run to the emergency. They'd start handling it right away. The rest of the militia would come up behind them with more gear and supplies and manpower. But those Minutemen were the guys who were going to get there first. In a modern context, you know, what would a Minuteman be called out to do? Well, you know, let's say these Antifa weirdos were acting up again, and the general militia got called up. That corps would get there first and start handling the problem. And then the rest of the militia, the general militia, would come up and with the additional supplies. So this is a Minuteman loadout. This is those guys who are going to respond first, are going to respond fastest, and going to respond hardest, what they're going to grab to go deal with the threat. The assumption in this scenario is that these guys are going to get to go back to their home base, that they don't have to have all their supplies, that they're not worried about long-term survival. This is a quick strike force response. It's a Minuteman. That's all they were. It's a great concept. It's one we need to bring back. So this is my Minuteman loadout. Two other things to keep in mind here. I'm always trying to do everything on the cheap. So this thing was built around some pieces that I already had laying around, and so I went and got the rest so that I could keep the cost of this down. This is not the one I would probably build if I had unlimited funds, but it's still pretty good. I promised you retro and old school. We're going to go retro and old school. Check this out. So what we got here is some old school 782 gear. It's what we called it in the Marine Corps, 782 gear. That's because of some supply thing. It was called 782 gear. We also called it deuce gear. We also called it web gear. I've got the old Y harness, which is old school even for me. When I was in boot camp, we used the H harness, which had instead of the one strap in back, it had two straps coming down and two straps in the front, and then it had this piece across the shoulders here. So if you laid it out flat, it looked like an H. This is a Y harness because if you lay it out flat, it looks like a Y. Some of you older school guys, track rock, and some of you others will remember this Y harness from Vietnam. With the Y harness, of course, you got to have your web belt, and you've got to have your magazine pouches. Obviously, this is a setup for an AR-15. I'm sure those silly communists have a similar setup, but I don't concern myself with them too much. These hold 3 magazines apiece, 30 rounders. There's a criticism of this setup with these magazine pouches, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then, of course, you got your 2 canteens. That's a quart each, so you got a half gallon of water. You got your butt pack, and in the butt pack goes all the stuff you think you need. I like to have electrical tape, believe it or not. 550 cord, some of you call it paracord. Your rations would go in here. Your Minuteman would only need about a day's worth of rations. This is just, listen, this guy's not going out long term, or if he's staying out long term, the rest of the militia's coming up with the rest of the supplies. So this guy needs, the Minuteman would need a day's worth of rations. If you had MREs, you could throw an MRE in there. It would be something you'd want easy to eat. You know, you're not going to be stopping to prepare food in this situation. You know, you want something you can reach in your butt pack, grab out, and munch on. And then I've got, and if it wasn't raining today, I'd take it out and show it to you, but it's raining. The single most important piece of gear in the infantryman's arsenal, the poncho liner. I actually have it rolled up in a poncho, which is pretty rare. You know, usually you never mess with the poncho. The only reason I have the poncho is to keep my poncho liner dry. That poncho liner was, you never moved without it. Anywhere we went, we always had that poncho liner. So if you were staying out a little bit longer without your resupply, you've got some shelter and just some basic comfort. Obviously, you want matches and whatnot. I've also got first aid kit in here. I almost forgot to talk about it. I'm not going to open it up. It's the old military style first aid kit. I don't know if they issue them anymore. They're real basic. A couple of bandages, an eye bandage, an arm sling, some water purification tablets, I believe some iodine. It's just real basic, you know. Now everything's got to be so complicated and high speed these days. Now they're called blowout kits. Used to just call them first aid kits. So that's it. If I had to guess how much money I have in this, the Y harness I had, that's why I went this route. This got given to me by an old Vietnam vet. His widow actually gave it to me. So I had that, and I had the butt pack, and I had the poncho liner and the poncho. So I went to a local surplus store. I got the belt, which is basically brand new. I think the belt was $5. The ammo pouches were $2 a piece, and I think total in the canteens with shipping and everything, I've got 20 bucks. I do not have the canteen cups yet. I want to get one, but it's not on the list so far. Now, I said there was some criticisms of this get-up, and there are. You know, the Marine Corps, even when I was in, had switched from the H harness to the LBV, and if I had my druthers, I'd probably go find an LBV. But it didn't seem worth it to spend the extra money when I had all this laying around. So the criticism of the magazine pouches is that they're here on your sides. Sometimes with some skinnier guys, they get up here on your front, and if you're on the ground in the prone position, sometimes they can keep you from getting fully in the prone. I don't think that's a legitimate criticism. I think I wear 34-inch pants, and these are clearly off to the side on me. I'd be able to get down in the prone just fine. So I don't think that's legitimate. That's the criticism I've heard. The LBV puts the magazines up on your chest, which does seem to work just a little bit better for whatever reason. Just getting them out and getting them in. It may just be training and familiarity with it. And then it's just something on your chest, a little extra protection. I don't know. It's not a big deal. These work great. It doesn't take long to get used to them at all. Just a few other extra things. If you ever watched our one gun, one knife video, you know I say my one knife is an axe. That's for a survival situation. That's where all you have is one gun and one knife. This is not that situation. On my loadout, I've got an old Glock Dagger. I've had this knife for probably since I was 15. I think my uncle gave it to me when I was around 15. I have done things to this knife that should be illegal, and it's in great shape. It's just a good basic metal dagger. It does what you need a knife to do, and it lasts well. So I've got this knife on there. I promised you some old school, and if the Y harness isn't old school enough for you, some of you really alert guys may be thinking that I left out a really important piece of gear, and that is a headlamp. Well, you don't need a headlamp if you're old school, people. Check out your moonbeam. Again, some of you older guys, Track Rock and others will recognize this. I don't know. I know why they've called it a moonbeam. They still issue these when I was in boot camp. This is 1995. The first thing you did when you got out of boot camp was get rid of this and buy a mag light. The second thing you did when you got out of boot camp was you lost your mag light and you got your moonbeam back out. But this is an old piece of gear. It has this one even has all the little lenses with it. I seem to remember them coming with a blue lens back in the day. This doesn't have a blue lens in it. Again, the widow of that old Army Sergeant First Class gave this to me. And maybe he'd lost the blue lens. Maybe they don't have them. But I've got the red lens in there. I don't know if the batteries are working. Oh yeah, there we go. So I got my red light, and of course the red light's important because it doesn't mess with your night vision, and it doesn't travel as far, so that if you're using it, you know, the enemy is not as likely to see you. Obviously, a headlamp is superior to the old moonbeam, but since we were going old school, I thought I'd go old school. And I tell you, one advantage this does have over a lot of modern headlamps is a lot of the modern headlamps, to get to the red setting, you have to go through the white light or even a blinking white light. And obviously, from a tactical standpoint, that is no bueno, people. So if you do have a headlamp, make sure it's one that does not have to click through the white light or any blinking settings to get to your red light. Because the red light, you got to have the red light. The white light's no good. You know, it wrecks your night vision. It travels a very, very long way and gives away your position. So that's it. An old school retro Minuteman loadout. Tell me what you think. I'd love to hear some ideas. If anyone's got anything better or different, put it in the comments section, man. Thank you.